We are live. Please unmute and start.
Yes, Saurabh ji, we can start.
Yeah, all are joined now. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Saurabh Singh, co-founder and director of Rare Diseases India Foundation, RDIF. It is my pleasure to welcome all the participants, attendees today on behalf of Rare Diseases India Foundation on this special occasion for commemorating 30 years of care for rare. RDIF is a patient advocacy group and established in 2019. This is a non-profit organization which works for the benefits for the patients and to raise awareness about rare disease in the country. First of all, many thanks to Sanofi Genzyme for supporting us for this great cause. I also thank to our strategic partner Acmeri to come forward. Now I would like to welcome our keynote speaker and chief guest, respected Dr. Ashok Valodi, who is former consultant pediatrician, metabolic unit from Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital, London, UK. We are really grateful that he is among us on this special day to raise awareness about rare diseases. He has a very vast experience in the field of human genetics. I also welcome to our eminent speaker, Professor Dr. Ashok Gupta, Head of Department, SMS Medical College, Jaipur. He is also in charge of Rare Diseases Division in Rajasthan. I welcome Professor Dr. Gautam Gangopadhyay. He is Head of Department Neurology, SSKM Hospital, Kolkata, West Bengal. This hospital is also identified as Rare Disease Center of Excellence, and that Dr. Gangopadhyay is one of the members of Rare Disease Technical Committee. I also welcome Professor Dr. Manjuri Mitra, Department of Pediatrics, Institute of Child Health, Kolkata, West Bengal. She is also a research director at Medicline Research, West Bengal. And last but not the least, most welcome Dr. Priyanshu Mathur, Associate Professor of Pediatrics Medicine at SMS Medical College and attached group of hospitals, Jaipur, Rajasthan. I would request Dr. Priyanshu to moderate this session today. Over to you, Dr. Priyanshu.
Thank you very much, Saurabh ji, for the kind introduction. So without wasting a time, I would like to invite Dr. Ashok Valodi sir to deliver his talk. After Dr. Valodi sir talk, we will have a panel discussion. And after panel discussion, we'll take the question answer session. Dr. Ashok Valodi sir.
Thank you, Priyanshu. Let me just share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah. Not yet.
No, sir.
Okay, sorry.
Not yet. Yeah.
Sorry.
Sir, please open the presentation first and then click on share screen and select.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now?
Yeah, now
Yes,
we
sir.
can see.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you very much. I would like to thank a few comments at the beginning. I'd like to thank Saurabh and the Rare Foundation for inviting me to give this talk. This is not a detailed talk on LSDs. I'm just raising a few points and issues that seem relevant to India. I have been working in this field with colleagues and families in India for many years now, so I have had to be selective because there are quite a few points to raise. My apologies in advance for this. Secondly, these are personal views, and wherever possible, I've tried to back them up with data, but getting data has not always been easy. I've not had a chance to meet colleagues or families in India for nearly 2 years now because of lockdown. So I may be out of touch with many issues for which, again, I apologize. I'm not going to discuss enzyme replacement therapy for two reasons. Firstly, there are many diseases for which ERT is not available, but these should not be neglected. And secondly, even for those diseases for which ERT is available, simply giving ERT is not the be-all and end-all. There are other aspects to management that we need to be aware of. Finally, while my talk focuses on LSDs, I believe that there are several issues that are pertinent to all rare diseases. So I hope that this talk is relevant to this event. Now, we're all aware of what the challenges to healthcare in India are. I'll just enumerate them: poorly funded public sector, low literacy rate, geographical constraints leading to poor access to healthcare in many areas, traditional belief, societal and cultural challenges. But I'm just going to deal with a few issues. So the first is to talk about the spectrum of LSDs. Now, the spectrum of LSDs as reported so far is somewhat different from that seen in other countries. And here's a slide showing two publications. The first, the historical publication by Meikle et al. From Australia in 1999, and the second from Agarwal et al. In 2015. And you can see that, for example, in the 1999 data, Gaucher disease is just 14%, whereas in Agarwal's data from 2015, it's 32%. If you compare, say, Saudi Arabia 2010, again to India 2015, you'll see that in Saudi Arabia, Sandoff disease, Niemann-Pick, Fabry are far more common than Gaucher disease. So why is the spectrum different in different countries? Well, first of all, there may be a true difference. And we see, for example, in Japan, where the incidence of MPS II is extremely high. Or it may be a lack of awareness of less visual LSDs. So there are probably some true differences, for example, in Japan, but there is definitely a lack of awareness, and this may result in diagnostic delays. Now, this is a paper from Agarwal et al. This is Mamta Muranjan's group, reporting in 2015. And I'm just going to give a few important slides. So this shows the four things: the interval between onset and suspicion, onset and presentation, onset and diagnosis, and presentation and diagnosis. By presentation, I mean presentation at the specialist center, that is at Mumbai. And you can see, whereas the average interval between onset and diagnosis was 14 months, the interval between presentation and diagnosis was only 1 month. So basically, the longest delays are from the onset to suspicion and diagnosis. Once the patient is seen at a specialist center, the diagnosis is made very quickly. Therefore, efforts need to be directed at raising awareness, both in the public, that is patient support groups and families, and amongst general pediatricians. Now, I should say that this diagnostic delays are not unique to India. So this is a paper from 2017, which looked at Fabry disease. And the blue bars represent patients between the years 2001 and 2006, and the red bars between 2007 and 2013. So an earlier cohort, the blue bar, and the red bar is the later cohort. And the x-axis shows the delay, the years between onset and diagnosis, the y-axis showing percentage of patients. So, for example, on the left, you can see that if you look at the group 0 to 4 years, it's approximately 30%. So in other words, about 30% of patients were diagnosed between the 0 and 4 years after symptom onset. And not surprisingly, if you go to the right, very few patients took as long as 55 or 60 years. But what is interesting is that there is very little difference between the two cohorts. So the diagnostic delays between 2001 to 6 and 2007 to 13 persisted. And why is this? So in many countries, this diagnostic delay has persisted. So this paper by Agarwal et al. That I referred to identified some issues. The first was poor awareness, leading to delays in initial workup and referral, and this could be applied to any country. But the next set really applies to India. Poor access to centers, low motivation from families, either poverty or illiteracy, lack of treatment. Families may simply not turn up at a specialist center if no treatment is available, or lack of diagnostic facilities. The next issue I wanted to raise was family screening, specifically, of course, for X-linked disorders. Now, this was a paper published this year by Germain et al., The Benefits and Challenges of Genetic Screening, Lessons from Fabry Disease. And this was a global effort. As you can see, many countries were represented on this paper. And importantly, Dr. Sheila Nambudri from India had input. So this did reflect the situation in India amongst other countries. So what were the issues identified? First was the cost, transport of dried blood samples, travel costs, patients may not be able to get to centers for testing, and the cost of the confirmatory tests, because screening is not sufficient. You have to have confirmatory tests. The second was societal issues. So many societies are patriarchal. For example, Mexico was a very strongly patriarchal society, but also in parts of India. And lastly, but not least, there is a stigma attached to diagnosis which strongly affects motivation. Next issue, dried blood spots. Now, DBS should be dried for 3 to 4 hours before packing. And the ambient temperature is important. This was identified in a paper from Nimhans quite recently, and the ambient temperature needs to be less than 24 degrees centigrade. So obviously in India, there may be issues with this, and care needs to be taken. Moving on to prenatal diagnosis. There is poor access to prenatal diagnosis, especially in rural areas. Communication of the result to parents is important. This may, in many areas, in many centers, this is regarded as an infringement of the rights of the child. And then there's the communication to others, because once the parents know, everybody wants to know, and half the village may want to know. And this may deny privacy, not just to the family, but importantly, to the newborn child. And lastly, and this is very important, PND by molecular genetics is the norm in India. But if you think about it, for an autosomal recessive disorder, PND will automatically generate carrier status. And this is not really appropriate. It is not the business of the parents to know if the child is a carrier or not. It is only important for the child for an autosomal recessive condition. But this is the situation in India, and we have to manage it. Another very important issue in India is prenatal diagnosis and sex selection. Now, sex selection in MTP is widespread in India, and despite legislation, selective abortion of girls has increased substantially. Most of India's population reside in states where selective abortion of girls is common, but I should emphasize there is no clear evidence that P&D plays a role in this, but you can imagine that this is a concern. Now, advanced clinical manifestations may be seen in the patient when they present. Now, this may result from diagnostic delays, financial constraints, or cultural practices. This is a patient I saw a few years ago in Dr. Muranjan's clinic. The family were from Indore. This patient with Gaucher disease, who maybe not very clear in the slide, but she had central cyanosis with a positive hepatojugular reflux. So she had pulmonary arterial hypertension. Now, had she been diagnosed and treatment started early, this would almost certainly have been prevented. Move on to eye movement examination, because this is a very important consideration in the diagnosis of type 3 disease. And my own view is that mistakes are being made in India. So here is a child I saw in Lucknow a few years ago with Gaucher disease. And on the left, we look at examination of saccades, pursuit, and on the right, examination of saccades. Now watch. Okay, so this shows you normal pursuit. This is saccades. You can immediately see that the saccades are abnormal, but unless you look for them in a specific way, you will miss them and you will miss the diagnosis of type 3 Gaucher disease. Sorry. The next slide is too much reliance is being made on relatively non-specific investigations such as bone marrow examination and X-rays. So when we look at the bone marrow in Gaucher disease and Niemann-Pick type B are very similar, and mistakes can be made in the diagnosis unless confirmatory tests are carried out. There can be an over-reliance on X-rays. So here's a patient from Kuwait who was referred to some years ago, and she was referred with a diagnosis of Morquio disease based on X-rays. Clearly, she does not have Morquio disease. She has a tracheostomy. She has no vision. If you look at her hands, they're quite MPS-like. And anyway, to cut a long story short, she was diagnosed eventually as having Marutu-Lamy disease, obviously completely different. Newborn screening is available for several conditions, but it may not be appropriate if treatment is not available. And in fact, this is one of the cornerstones of newborn screening. Treatment has to be appropriate and available. Cohort screening, therefore, may be more appropriate in countries like India, where treatment is not available for many LSDs. Cohort screening for LSD, examples of these are Fabry disease, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, end-stage renal disease, or stroke in young males, or in late-onset Pompe disease. Limb-girdle muscular dystrophy patients should be screened for late-onset Pompe disease. In the treatment, as I mentioned, I'm not going to talk about LSDs, but I just wanted to raise this point. Is bone marrow transplantation becoming a more attractive therapeutic option in countries like India, where there are financial constraints, where BMT is widely available, and where, in fact, the results of BMT over the years has improved significantly with very good results on morbidity and mortality. Now, we should really emphasize that non-specific management is crucial to outcome. It isn't just about giving ERT, and in fact, ERT is not available for everyone. Now, there are many hospital specialties required. The LSD team, orthopedics, spinal orthopedics, neurosurgery, cardiology, anesthesia. But I wanted to raise just three which I felt are relatively neglected in India: anesthesia, dysphagia, speech therapy, and psychiatry. The first is anesthesia. Now, as you know, for example, in MPS, there are many airway problems, and this requires expert anesthesia. There are a wide variety of anesthetic techniques available. But the reality is that India has one of the smallest pools of anesthesiologists in the world. These are some data looking at density of anesthetists per 1 lakh population. And the red signifies 0 to 1, less than 1, and the amber less than 3. And you can see that almost, well, in the entire all of India actually is less than 3 anesthesiologists per lakh of population. So you can imagine that the population of India is very poorly served. Dysphagia swallowing assessments. There are various assessments available: video fluoroscopy, FEES. A recent survey of dysphagia practice patterns in India, this was published last year by Rangaratnam and Desai, showed that there is considerable variation in patterns. There's a huge funding shortage because people don't recognize this as an important specialty. There's a lack of training with little or no access to instrumental assessments. This is in a clinic in Mumbai, which is actually a private clinic, but more such clinics are needed in the public sector. Psychiatric Services. Here's a patient with Sanfilippo disease for whom there is no other treatment available other than psychiatric input. A survey carried out 2 years ago by Hussain and Purohit showed, importantly, that the mental health budget, they showed the mental health budget in different countries, and you can see the budget in India compared to high-income countries or even low-income countries, very poor. So this was a study looking at specialized mental health services in children in different circumstances at a tertiary center. This I found very interesting. This was from NIMHANS. This is the Swatantra Clinic. And this is just a clip off the website. I think everyone is familiar with the NIMHANS Center, and we really need more such centers throughout India. So, of course, multi-specialty clinics are important, and Chennai and many other centers now are setting these up. A video clinic is a very good idea for training. So here's a video clinic I ran in Chennai a few years ago, where I'm sitting in a room examining the patient, but I'm linked to a room next door where an audience is sitting. Anyone who wants can sit there. I'm demonstrating clinical signs, interviewing the patient. So it's not confrontational for the patient and the family, at the same time educational for the audience. So what are the priorities for India? Again, these are just personal views. Postgraduate genetics training, raising awareness, a small number of specialist centers working together, national centers, networks that link with international ones, quality controls for labs, and managing expectations for families. This is very important because the first thing the family asks on diagnosis is there treatment? If the answer is no, they just disappear. So we have to emphasize the importance of non-specific treatment. There are things that can be done for the child that don't necessarily involve specific treatment. What are the requirements for pediatricians? Obviously, clinical suspicion, awareness of initial lab investigations, and awareness of the specialist centers, who to refer to. So these are the points I've covered: the spectrum of disease, delays in diagnosis and their consequences, issues around family screening, the use of dried blood spots, prenatal diagnosis, eye movements, non-specific tests, newborn screening, neglected specialties. So you can imagine I've had to go through this very quickly, but I hope I've been able to just air these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Valudi sir, for a nice presentation. So till now, there is no question in chat box. So we are moving to next part of the today's presentation, that is a panel discussion. So I hope my slides are visible.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So for today's panel discussion, we have 4 eminent panelists, Dr. Ashok Valodi sir, Dr. Ashok Gupta sir, Dr. Gautam Gangopadhyay sir, and Dr. Manjuri Mitra ma'am. So so the topic of today's panel discussion is about rare disease and rare disease policy. So the first question of today's panel discussion is to Dr. Manjuri Mitra ma'am. What are the rare diseases and its prevalence in India?
Yeah, very good evening to all. The first and foremost thing is even today, when we discuss about the rare disease, the first and foremost thing which comes to our mind that the incidence is really rare. And do we really need to have so many things like awareness? The pediatrician should know if it is so rare. But if you really see all metabolic disorders put together, individually, it may be 1 in 40,000, 1 in 1 lakh. But all metabolic diseases put together, it comes to nearly 1 in 500. So practically, we would say that it is really not rare. If you have the perception that it is very rare, the awareness will not come in the minds of the pediatricians. At least I'm talking of the general pediatricians. Unless and until they pick up, it will never come to the specialist clinic. I'll give a very, very small recent story, and I think it will make the picture clear, though we have a larger audience of patients also and the parents group also, but even those doctors who are there, unless and until you have an awareness in the mind, you cannot diagnose. And to make that, you have to understand that the disease is quite prevalent in diverse symptoms. A very recent story, when we were having virals in India, there was suddenly an upsurge of crowdfunding and it went into viral. That the amount of money was pouring in for SMA collections. One of the junior doctors, a very promising young doctor, he said, "Madam, does it really mean that so many money will be going for a rare disease? And then so many other important diseases are there which the patients are not getting any treatment. Why the one should bother about rare disease?" So I had to explain it. It is not that rare. That is what is very important. And it should be the responsibility of every pediatricians to find the disease, and then unless and until they have it in their mind, as Dr. Valodi said, it starts from the postgraduates, not even the postgraduate, the undergraduate. In our undergraduate date, we never gave some importance on those metabolic diseases. But unless and until it's given that importance, it will never be in the top of the mind, and diagnosis will be very difficult. I just remember one small story that I think 10 years before I went for a program, it was just 2 days of Pompe disease. And I was totally with Pompe minded. So whatever I was seeing, I was getting Pompe. I used to make a diagnosis, let's screen for Pompe, let's screen for Pompe. And I used to get 1 or 2 Pompe. And in that process, I did make a diagnosis of Pompe with a very, very general diagnosis, very, very general symptoms. So unless and that mindedness comes, it is difficult. It is difficult. So we have to understand what we are talking of rare is not rare. I think slowly and slowly the rare disease, even the government will think that, okay, rare disease. So they also don't give a priority in that. So my submission, a time has come when we have to take out the rare disease and say that metabolic disease and the prevalence is not so insignificant, particularly considering the huge population. Even Gaucher disease, 1 in 40,000, the population will be quite significant. What is the part which I would like to highlight.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. So now I will move to the next question. So the next question is to Dr. Gautam Gangopadhyay, sir. What are the issues faced by rare disease patients? Can you tell us in brief?
Gautam, you need to unmute yourself.
Gautam, sir?
Am I audible now?
Yeah, yes, sir. Now you are audible.
Okay. Now the issue faced by the rare disease patient, number one is this: in India, not only in India, in many developing countries, there is no true incidence and prevalence rate. India, I know there is as a whole in rare diseases, there is no true incidence and prevalence rate. And the problem is the patients face the issue is as Dr. Manjuri have already made, that it needs rare diseases that needs to be learned from the from the undergraduate, not in the postgraduate, undergraduate stage. And then that will be it is the doctors who will know by the rare disease, and that will be identified. That design that should need a design of clinical studies, and that should be, it's a better in rare disease case control study is much better. And then there will be we have to think, if we identify the rare disease, the patient party face, if there will be any medicine, how shall we get the medicine? There's another problem. In even few the medicines are so costly, even the upper class people cannot maintain the continuously this therapeutic measure. And in lysosomal storage disease, the thing is the patient initially feels that it is the responsibility of the doctor to start with enzyme replacement therapy, ERT. There should be must be an inclusion and exclusion criteria. In rare diseases, if we cannot detect it early, or if there is no neonatal or prenatal screening during that time, there is a problem is that if there will be any neurological involvement during that time, this treatment of this, like Gotchas, if we treat the Gotchas, except the neurological symptoms, all the symptoms improved. The neurological symptoms does not improve because this is a large molecules drugs, and that cannot penetrate the blood-brain barrier. So in this situation, we have to diagnose early. The issue should be, and properly discovering, test and genetic testing, the enzyme assay, that should be done, and proper training of the scientists, clinical scientists, that properly guiding the patient party to go to the genetic lab. But some genetic labs do not have the sequencing, and that is copying, and this is the point mutation deletion that should be everywhere. Where there is a sequencing, one can study genetically, prove this thing properly. This should be the keep into the mind. So what I think the ways to help the patient, and patient to be aware this, properly give the education, and this needs, because this is a variety of presentation, so it should be in a lucid, in the local language. It is responsibility, our responsibility, or it's a rare disease committee, this committee, they should be spread this awareness, or they should some video that should be in the local languages, and everywhere if that can be distributed, like epilepsy will do it, that this education is much more important. And then we should, if any, we ask the questions to the patient party, if we can, what are the symptoms, when they will run to the doctor, especially the pediatricians, because the pediatricians will examine properly and treat this child patient properly than with the adult neurologist. It does not require neurological examination. Pediatrician is the far more sufficient, but keeping into the mind, this is that Sir Velarde mentioned, that is the multidisciplinary approach. It requires total, not an individual doctor, should total multidisciplinary approach should be there. And we have to, everything we have to assess the patient properly and educate the patient. And regarding the headache of the issue, the patient's parents or the legal guardians, they have faced regarding how to procure the medicine. This will be the first thing. And government's protocol, there is a 3 division. It is not possible only. So what I think, to overcome the excessive cost of medicine, this exuberant charges, everyone, the 138 crores of population in India, if 20%, some population will come forward along with the medical association, all the department from anatomy to the last neurologist, now each and every department, the medical pharmaceutical companies, each and every parents, their relatives and society, if we come simultaneously and they can donate either crowd funding as depicted by the government of India, then there will be periodically, then I hope we shall get large amount of money. And we have to talk with some genetic lab, depicted that is the government, the guided genetic lab, where proper sequencing will occur. Though say that genetic lab will, few patients they cannot afford the genetic testing. That genetic testing and that collection of money, this is nowadays awareness is now very common. We can aware through the media, or we can aware everything, and now availability is very good. So in West Bengal, we aware the patients, Indian government setup, everything is free. But in this medicine, we have to aware and give assured the confidence of the patient party that we are collecting the money in such a way, and we can surely serve to your child in the rare diseases. It will be very helpful to all.
Yes,
okay.
sir. Thank you very much, sir. You covered all the points. So I'm moving to the next question. Next question is to Dr. Ashok Gupta, sir. How to raise awareness about rare disease? What are your thoughts on this point?
Thank you, Priyanshu, for this question. And when I thought of this, how do you raise awareness about rare disease? One thing really comes to my mind. One, you need to have a local awareness thought, then regional, and then at the national level. Because if you do a local awareness, the point is when I talk of a local awareness, because when we started our own rare disease program here at J. Killan Hospital, because we've been working here now almost for 7-8 years. So what had happened was when we initiated this rare disease treatment program at J. Killan, it brought in sensitization of the young residents. And when these young residents got sensitized, for the first 2 years, the impact was not as great. But today, after 7 years, what you find is that our unit diagnosis starts thinking of Pompe right in neonatal period. The moment they see a cardiomegaly, dilate cardiomyopathy, the first thing that we do is we go in for investigating for Pompe. And similarly for muscular atrophies and then congenital muscular dystrophies and other things. So what has happened is that sensitization has taken place locally because you have an institute which is training or which is working on these children. And so that one of the things that I believe is that across the country, if you want to create awareness, it has to be at a local level in every medical institute across the country. I think this is one time, because our approach has to be a slow process, but a strong process where you have a strong group of people who are getting trained, and when they grow up as part of the training program within a period of 4 to 5 years, you'll find a big group of doctors across the country who are sensitive and supportive of the thought of rare disease. Now, what happens when you just create a ripple? It is probably not the right thing. So we have to move systematically, get into all medical schools in the country and they have to have, as part of the pediatrics training, at least they has to have a program of at least 4 weeks in the field of rare diseases. So it's going to bring in a big impact. Number two thing is, when I talk of awareness, my thought has been to influence the policy makers, because policy makers across, they are the people who will be driving the issue of rare disease. And that is where interaction with people who are in the government, which includes politicians, which includes bureaucrats, and which also includes media, because many things across is being driven by media, wherein the politicians and the bureaucrats also fall in. So the second group of people, from apart from the medical personnel, you need to be working very focused on the politicians and the bureaucracy and the media. And also we need to raise the awareness that there has been a major development since the last 20-25 years, that some of these disorders which were never thought of that could be treated are being treated. And there is a lot of charitable access avenues available, a lot of research avenues available. So because in our own institute, we've been able to provide charitable access treatment to SMA and other disorders. So that's going to be another big area to work on. So there is a lot of things that need to be done about raising awareness, but it has to move in a very organized and systematic manner. And for the regional and the national perspective, there's another important thing is that we have to be working with the national medical societies, which includes the Indian Academy of Pediatrics and also the Indian Medical Association and the Association of Physicians of India. So these three groups, they need to develop a subgroup working on rare disease. And so if you do integrate the local impact, the national and the regional, we are going to be very successful in the long run, maybe down the line, 4 to 5 years.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Ashok Gupta, sir, you described it excellently and your thoughts are very useful. So I will move to the next question. So next question is to Dr. Manjuri Mitra. How to enhance detection rate of rare disease and how to establish early diagnosis in patients with rare diseases. Your thoughts in points. Ma'am, your voice is not audible.
Yeah, you need to unmute, Manjuri.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah. So as we have been discussing, enhanced detection of rare disease. Now that today, even if I know that we have a center, so how many centers are there in India? That is number one. Very few centers. So we have to expand the number of centers. We have to expand the awareness through various social media or through various CMEs, particularly at the very initial state with even the postgraduates. They should be trained about this. And availability of the basic screening test, even the enzyme assays. And the government should be involved in the genetic assays. Otherwise, it becomes very expensive. First of all, we say that, okay, we diagnose, and then we say that there's an expensive genetic confirmation, and then there's no treatment, or the treatment is so expensive. So I think up to genetic mutation, even the government sectors should start in getting involved in this one. So unless and until we are able to get a detection, the interest of the pediatricians, the interest of the junior doctors will not be there. Only by clinical symptoms confirmation, unless and until confirmed, then comes the treatment part. But the early diagnosis is very important. So 2-3 important steps, which I would like to say. As I have said, undergraduate focus on metabolic disease, because this will be a national policy tomorrow. So if that is a policy, then backtrack, undergraduate focus on metabolic disease, that should be the number one thing. Then availability of the diagnosis. The moment they are into third year, they should be able to diagnose cases, not only read in the books. So the diagnosis availability, all the screening methodologies and the genetic sequencing test should be available in the government medical colleges. And I think the way the government is involved in so many infrastructural development, this can easily be done if thought of. If this is done, early diagnosis becomes easier, much easier. You have to have a mind. As I said, if you are minded, if you are metabolic minded, you will not miss diagnosis. It is not there rare. Again, I will come back to the same point. One has to be minded and one has to be able to diagnose. Like If you know that you can diagnose early Pompe disease, you will be aware of cardiomegaly and along with the other symptoms, a little bit of tonicity difficulty, a little bit of excessive choking. I really made a diagnosis just simply there was excessive choking in a healthy child, and the screening test and the sequence and even the genetic mutation came positive. So that level is only possible if the entire infrastructure is available. So the government, while they are working with fundraising, while they are working with panel for the medical treatment, they should also work in the infrastructure, because how many support the companies can give on the free diagnostic kit, which we are getting as an institute, we are getting. So we are making a diagnosis for last 10, 12 years, we are making a diagnosis because of this kit availability, we are making a diagnosis. So this should be available at the government level. And this is, I think it has to be taken to that level.
Thank you very much, ma'am. So you pointed toward two very important issues. One is the diagnosis should be available at each and every government sector, and it should be cheap, affordable. And also you covered about the undergraduate, if they will be trained, so they can have we can have better detection rate. So I will move to the next question. So next question is to Dr. Gautam, sir. How to establish quality control for labs doing genetic testing?
Now, the genetic quality control for the labs doing genetic testing, this is always followed by the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendment, this act that should be periodically checked up by this not only the genetic, every laboratory. And the lab quality control it is designated to detect, reduce, and correct the difficulties in the lab and the proper analytic process prior to release to the patient's result. We have the genetic lab in our Bangalore Institute of Neurology, but that is only for the neurological disease, like only the rare disease, SMA is there, DMD is there, Becker's is there, that we can do it. But we do not have any sequencer. We now collaborate with S.N. Pandit Hospital, and there is a genetic lab and Pollani. But the thing is that in our institute, the benefit we are getting whenever we admit the patient, if the patient is admitted, we can do the genetic testing free of cost for the patient. That availability is there. And so we always, and in the genetic testing, we have one is assistant profession and one senior research officer. Both have this PhD in the genetic. And that will be their monitoring this quality, maintain the quality control. Because as a rule and as a whole, honestly speaking, I do not know very much regarding genetic testing. I do not know it and do not do the headache. It is this geneticists, they will do this thing, and because being the head of the department, they will give us this will require, this will do, and we periodically bring from the other institute the genetic expert, and whether these things are going on smoothly, correctly or not, that I want to learn it. And another happy things is that because of the rare diseases, now government new crowdfunding, new laws, we open up from 3rd November a rare disease special clinic once a week on every Wednesday from 10. This team, UPD, is included the pediatrician, the physician in case of adult, the neurologist, orthopedic surgeon, chest physician, physical medicine, and obviously cardiology will be there. This shit we have planned to do, and from the genetic lab, our assistant professionals included to monitoring and keep the official report, or who judge the official report and comment regarding the legal letters are coming in different way. So we have to start this thing. And I think twice a year that should be monitored by the other genetic personalities, whether this lab is going properly or not. We individually cannot maintain it properly.
Thank
We
you.
can only.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. So because of the limitation of time, so I would move on to the next question. Next question is to Dr. Ashok Veludi, sir. So what can be the advantages of establishing national networks and enhance their linkage with the international networks working in the field of rare diseases? Dr. Ashok Veludi, sir. Sir, your video, sir, your audio is.
Sorry, so there are a couple of points here. One is, first of all, you have to have a good national network with people who are respected in their fields and who are committed to this area and communicating well with each other. That has to be, because people from outside need to see that. They also need to have good lab setups. And then the collaboration with international networks can be extremely productive. You can have cross-fertilization of ideas. You can have training for clinicians and laboratories. You can have collaborative publications. And in this way, the standards of care will be raised. And also it will be good for the patients and the families to see that these collaborations are being set up. It may also be good for the pharmaceutical companies to see that these collaborations are set up. The great advantage in India, of course, is that English is widely spoken, and this is very attractive to both international networks and pharmaceutical companies. But we need to then tap into that, those connections and make them count. There's no use just having the connections. Yeah. I think also, sorry, I should say that one more thing is it is a good way of giving exposure to junior colleagues, because from what I see, the opportunities for junior colleagues is limited for various reasons. I don't see them at international conferences. I don't see their names on papers and things like this. And there are reasons for this. You know, maybe they're just not getting the exposure or interest in these conditions. So by having these national networks, I think junior colleagues should be brought into this national networks. You can have junior representatives, for example, on the national networks, because I think in this way, the motivation amongst junior colleagues will improve because they are the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. So now the next question is to Dr. Ashok Gupta, sir. What is the role of pediatrician in early suspicion of rare diseases and early referral to a specialized center?
I think are the most important feature as far as the rare disease issue is concerned, because they are going to minimize the time gap which has been existing all throughout, because for the last so many years, we've been talking of the onset of symptoms to the diagnosis being something like 4 to 5 years in different disorders. So that's one thing where I believe as the pediatricians, if they are more proactively involved, they're more trained and more educated and more sensitive, they are going to transform the rare disease program. And at the same time, they are also going to bring in another important component, because once you start diagnosing, the epidemiology is going to change. Because if I have to say about something like DMD or talk or SMA, I say that the frequency is much, much more than that has been reported so far. Because we have had very poor epidemiology in the country. So what Dr. Veludi rightly said, that yes, if we have a good network, and this network, if it's the national network, we're probably going to bring in that big epidemiology, and then I think we'll have the industry with us, then we'll have the government with us. So pediatricians, I believe, are the only people who can bring in the kind of change at a larger perspective, and even at the micro level, the early diagnosis, because the focus today should be to screen before clinical manifestations. Because if you screen them, you pick them before disease happens or before the irreversibility of symptoms happen, then that's the role of pediatricians. The pediatricians need to be sensitive, more focused on early diagnosis before clinical manifestations. That's going to be stronger on the screening program. Move to after the screening to pick them early, and then they have also got to be aware of the kind of management programs available. And earlier, what I said was charitable risks is another connectivity, rightly identified. Yes, international networks are going to give you that kind of support if you have really been able to understand and put it on across the globe. And early referral to specialized centers, that's another important thing, because what's happened is the information regarding the various centers across the country and their connectivity is extremely poor. Even in my own state, it's so difficult for people to understand that which is the only rare disease program, and the distances are so are really big. So it's important that yes, we need to educate and sensitize the pediatricians and in referring these patients early, so that the right treatment is introduced. Because we've been getting individuals of Gaucher disease who have been splenectomized with the presumptive diagnosis of cytopenias not responding, that is hypersplenism was one of the thoughts. And so I think we have around four children on our follow-up. So that's the kind of situation, because the referral centers are not in their mind, they are not aware. So pediatricians are the only people who are going to bring about the change, and I think that's one focus that each one of us needs to really put into. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So next question is to Ashok Velodi, sir. So rare diseases, how to develop robust basis of rare diseases. So what can be done to develop robust database? Your thoughts, sir.
Well, this is this is a very challenging issue because, you know, what quite often happens is that a group of people get together and say, okay, let's develop a database. But there's a lot more to it than that. First of all, you have to make sure you're not reinventing the wheel. There may be other databases out there that are perfectly satisfactory. And quite often people start up databases only because they want to own the data, for rather personal or even selfish reasons. You've got to be prepared to contribute and submit data to international databases if that's appropriate and if it's serving the purpose. The other thing you have to remember is the cost and the infrastructure required to run a database, because once the people who've started the database leave the scene, who continues the database? I've seen more than one database that's just lying unused for years because the people who started it have gone and nobody has taken it up. So you've got to have a mechanism for continuity. And that's where the international databases are very strong, because they have that mechanism. There is a quid pro quo there. The international registries and the people running them have to be prepared to share their data generously and openly with anybody who asks for them, and not say, well, you know, this is our data. So it does work both ways, but that is the overall thing. When you contribute, when you're setting up the database, you have to be really careful about what fields you set up. Because if you set up 300 fields, then that's not going to work. Say, I don't know, SMA or Gaucher or whatever it is. You cannot have a field for every single aspect of the disease, because a lot of them are simply not going to get filled by the pediatricians or the clinicians. You've got to have a few relevant fields that you think, though, the clinicians will be able to quickly fill in easily, and that are relevant, that they see are relevant, and that can be used later in data analysis, comparative data analysis, compare with other data registries, and so on. So there are a lot of considerations before we go into this area.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for your guidance. So I'm moving on to the next question. Next question is to Dr. Ashok Valodi sir. So how to promote research in the area of rare diseases, and what are the resources for researchers to get research grant from national and international organization? What are the resources from which they can get easily? So
so I don't know the answer to the second question. I'm obviously this is related to India, so I am not sufficiently up to date with the situation in India for getting funding for research. But how to promote research, I think it is not, it's challenging, but it's not difficult. You have to motivate junior doctors. I think that's the key. You have to motivate them to want to do this. There are several areas that should be tackled. One is simply writing. The quality of written manuscripts is variable. And how to write an article, how to write a medical article. You know, this is not something that comes in MBBS training. And this is something perhaps that universities or pharmaceutical companies, I think Genzyme actually had a program in Delhi that once a year or something, they invited people from over India, like a 1-week course or something, a resident course. But like that, I mean, even more local universities, like whether it's Jaipur or Kolkata, or, they can have, you know, short 1 or 2 day courses on how to write medical articles. And these can be supervised by senior colleagues. They should be. So you could send these articles out to peer review, get feedback back from international colleagues. What I have done in the past is, if I get a journal article for review as a communicating editor, I send it to a junior colleague in India to give them practice in reviewing and writing critical appreciation of, because for me, certainly as a clinician, this has improved my clinical skills, my ability, even though I've not done sort of laboratory research, it improves the way I see my patients, the way I treat them. I think it's made me a better clinician.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for your guidance. So I will move on to the next question.
That's all.
Sorry. Hello? Okay. So should I move to the next question? So next question is to Dr. Ashok Gupta, sir. Hope from the rare disease policy. What are your thoughts?
The rare disease policy gives us a great, it gives you a great feeling that yes, at least we have taken the first step. The policymakers getting sensitized to the need for special program for rare disease patients. I think that's one big victory for the rare disease patients, and also in terms of like it's been a national policy, so the government of India's commitment is there, and in addition to this, because for people like us who have been into academics, we've been working hard to sensitize the government. This has given us real good support from our own researchers, because we come from the state of Rajasthan, and our health issues are related to the state of Rajasthan, and because they don't have a separate policy. So it has made our lives easier, making them sensitized on the need on implementing the rare disease policy. And for that matter, even the state of Rajasthan has developed a rare disease technical committee, and they've given us a chance to be there on the board and to influence and tell the government the need for extra budget for some of those disorders where these patients cannot afford treatment. And this has also brought in the newer drugs and newer diagnostic mechanisms coming into place. So rare disease policy for patients is going to be good, because again, it's also going to give a big impetus to the newborn screening program, which is still very much underdeveloped in the country. So one, we're going to do a lot of screening. That's going to be a big supportive of the quality of life children are going to have. And another important thing is that, yes, for one-time therapies, the government is providing funds there, and for completely feasible conditions, again, there are funds available for managing these patients. And the third important thing that has happened is following this, the thought and the people who are into crowd funding have certainly come up. There are many organizations that have got involved into developing crowdfunding, and as was rightly identified by Dr. Manjari, the SMA patients could collect 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs, which we never thought in the past, because for most of us, getting money was very difficult, and the crowdfunding has clearly shown a great way, but it's only because for the first time the government of India has endorsed it. And so this is one policy which is going to be the starter of this big change that we are going to see down the line in the coming year. So hats off to the government for having given us this initiation and support to the patients as well as the academic group working in the rare disease.
Thank you very much, sir.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Thank you very much,
Hello.
sir. So next question is to Dr. Manjari Mitra, ma'am. What can be the funding resources for the treatment of these patients? So most of the part is all covered by Dr. Ashok Gupta, sir. Whatever you want to add, you can add, ma'am.
Yeah, I think most of the things are covered. Like I'll just give a very recent examples, like 2-3 companies, they are doing a clinical research on these diseases. So that is another aspect, like 1 year they are giving a treatment to see the safety and efficacy, and then those patients should be targeted that their treatment gets continued. In India will be undergoing that clinical trial at Hunter and Fabry's. So the government should ensure that from 1 year that once they are enrolled, they should be continued.
Right.
So that is about the whole thing. Like funding will be the same thing which government is taking initiative. And I think there's a good movement going on. It's a very difficult thing, but it will be proved worth in due course of time, not very far off now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So next question is to Dr. Gautam, sir. So what is the national portal for rare diseases, designation of a specialist center in rare disease policy, and process by which applications can be made at national portal? So this is the last question of today's panel discussion. Dr. Gautam, sir. Question is to Dr. Gautam, sir. Gautam, sir. Ha.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. Hello. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Your voice is audible. So how can we
Okay,
make applications on the national portal? So that's the question.
National portal. This is the government has opened a national portal.
Yes, sir.
For 2nd April 2021. After they have chalked out the inclusion. They have defined rare diseases by the Ministry of Health Welfare and under the chairmanship of the DGHS. And that meeting was held, initial meeting was held on 18th and 19th July 2018 at All India Institute, Delhi. And they categorized the rare diseases and then reference for therapeutic guidelines, their inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, and exit criteria. And now recently what government has regarding this, that is their national portal, they have already given a portal, but sorry, I do not have this portal today. I failed to collect this portal. I shall give you the portal, this portal advantage, this portal, that is how to you donate the money. This, as per the government proposal, crowdfunding for financial support on 2021, government have told that most of the cases there is no treatment, but there is certain condition, there is a definite treatment is there. So government, they are divided into 3 categories. That is the 3 categories that government will financial support forward to give 20 lakhs under the umbrella scheme of Rashtriya Arogya Nidhi that shall be provided by the central government for the treatment of those diseases that are required. That is the one-term treatment. That is the group 1. This policy documented reads, now beneficiaries for this financial assistance would not be limited to below poverty line. This is the extended to about 40% of the populations of our country who are eligible under Pradhan Mantri Jana Arogya Yojana policy for the treatment in government tertiary hospital only. And that otherwise there is a other, they have divided into the other way, other 2 types in the financial benefit. That is those who needs the long-term treatment would benefit and can be made available at a relatively low cost effect.
I would request Gautam Ganguly to please speak louder. We are not able to hear properly.
Yeah. So
Okay.
yes. So just to summarize, sir, please just summarize how do we can make applications? Should we send the patient to this specialized center, or we can make applications by ourselves, the other centers, those who are not center of excellence?
No, government has fixed up all over the India few centers.
Okay, so other centers need to send patient to this specialized center, and from there only
Local
applications.
center, and then there will be
Application.
they
Okay.
data loaded data to the portal.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. That will be there is 8 or 9 center all over the India.
Yes, sir.
They loaded the portal up there, everything. The performance should be fulfilled, then loaded, then the head disease committee, they will decide to whom they will give the therapy or whom will not get it.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. So I think now the panel discussion is over. Thank you very much to the esteemed panelists. We had an excellent panel discussion today. Now I would like to invite Saurabh Singh ji for the final vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on this special occasion and giving a brief knowledge about the rare disease and the policy also. And the question was very valid to all the speakers, and it is very helpful for all of us. So I would like to thank Dr. Ashok Velodi, who came here for this special day. And thank you, Dr. Gautam Gupta and Dr. Manjuri Mitra, Dr. Gautam Ganguly. Thank you, Dr. Priyanshu, for being a moderator for this.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Have a nice day. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you. Right.